From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Stefania Bravo, and this is From the South. The U.S. Justice Department has announced 17 new charges against the WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange. Assange is still being held in detention in London after he was dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy in April. He had enjoyed asylum there since 2012. The United States is already seeking his extradition on one count of disclosing classified documents. The 17 new charges relate to violations of the Espionage Act, and each carries a maximum sentence of between 5 and 10 years. The head of the U.S. Southern Command, Craig Fowler, has admitted the U.S. government has plans for a military intervention in Venezuela. Speaking at a forum at the Florida State University, Fowler said that the current strategy to apply pressure on the Venezuelan government is working, adding that the Southern Command's role is to be prepared for any eventuality, including a military intervention. And during a press briefing in Moscow, Russia, the spokesperson for Russia's foreign ministry condemned any U.S. military intervention in Venezuela, as well as the Venezuelan opposition for holding talks with the U.S. Southern Command in this regard.
Major representatives of other regions are against an armed intervention in Venezuela. U.S. military continue open provocations. On the 9th of May, the Coast Guard vessel of the United States was identified in the territorial waters of Venezuela at a distance of 20 kilometers from the La Guaira port. This deteriorates the situation and does not help build additional trust and confidence. At the same time, the radical opposition has initiated talks with the U.S. Southern Command to oust the legitimate authorities. This is beyond common sense. We urge upon all responsible politicians of Venezuela to adhere to exclusively peaceful methods of political struggle. We believe that any steps that are aimed at waging a civil war and any attempts to oust the legitimate president by force are unacceptable. This is a way and path of violence and bloodshed.
A 10-year-old girl from El Salvador died in U.S. custody last year after being detained by Border Patrol. The girl's death was not previously reported and brings the number of similar cases to 6. The U.S. Department of Health said the child was medically fragile and had a history of congenital heart defects. She died on December 29th from a fever and respiratory illness at a hospital in Omaha, Nebraska. A player from Colombia's women's national football team was found dead on Wednesday. She had been missing for a number of days. The body of 22-year-old Lady Asprilla was found on the side of a road in the Cauca department. She had gone missing on May 19th after leaving a friend's house in her motorcycle. Police have told local media that her body showed no signs of violence. Students have faced heavy repression by police in Honduras during a protest against President Juan Orlando Hernandez near Congress. Dozens of demonstrators demanded lawmakers to annul at least 11 decrees aimed at privatizing the health and education sectors. They joined teachers and doctors who have been staging a strike for over 2 weeks now. Police tried to disperse the protesters with tear gas. Organizers say they will continue demonstrating on Thursday across the country. And Guatemala is preparing for presidential elections, which will take place on June 16th. The Supreme Electoral Court and political parties have defined valid designs to be used in the elections. The country faces an unusual situation after the 2 leading candidates were prohibited from running by a top court. Former Attorney General Telma Aldana was banned due to corruption allegations, while Suri Rios, daughter of the former dictator Efraín Rios Montt, was banned for being relative of someone responsible of war crimes.
This creates a scenario where any candidate that is in the competition has the possibility of reaching a second round. In our 35 years of electoral history, we haven't had a process with these kinds of characteristics where anyone has a chance.
Missing persons families and human rights advocates in Mexico will commemorate the International Week of the Disappeared with a nationwide march on May 30th. A week-long campaign also aims to call attention to the plight of the victims and their loved ones.
Intervención en el Zócalo y evento político-cultural.
The marches will take place under the slogan, "For all the victims of forced disappearance, truth, justice, forgiveness, never forget, never." The United Nations has defined enforced or involuntary disappearance as a particularly heinous violation of human rights and an international crime.
We need to remember that enforced disappearance is often a state-committed crime against humanity, carried out by officers of the Army, federal police, municipal and state police, as well as paramilitary groups. The responsibility lies with the head of the federal executive, since these are ongoing crimes. Many of the victims of enforced disappearance have not been found. A severe violation of human rights is still happening.
Some believe there has been a lack of political will by those who hold the reins of power to address the issue and to bring those responsible to justice. It is not unusual for several members of the same family to go missing, either after being arrested by state security forces or taken away by persons, usually with the complicity of corrupt members of state security forces, such as police or military.
The new government has to substantially change the policies of previous governments. You see, state terrorism is still putting people's lives at risk, while negatively impacting the wider society. Journalists, human rights defenders, and social workers seem to be particular targets.
The week-long national campaign against forced disappearance will end on May 30th, with a grand march in Zócalo, the main square in central Mexico City.
We now move to Zimbabwe, where a renowned politician and former chief of spy during the liberation struggle, Dumiso Dabengawa, has died at the age of 79. Nicknamed the Black Russian, Dabengawa died while in Kenya after returning from India, where he had gone for medical treatment. Dabengawa was detained for 4 years in the 1980s, accused of treason, but was later appointed Home Affairs Minister after a peace deal. He later left the ruling party in 2009 to lead an opposition party supporting key opposition leaders in successive elections. President Emerson Mnangagwa has issued a condolence message calling him a great son of Africa.
The late Comrade Dumiso Dabengawa ranks high among a pioneering generation of our early nationalists and freedom fighters whose contributions to the liberation of our country were as enormous as they remain historical. As we mourn his untimely departure, our whole nation is lifted by the story of his life and that of his generation.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. The new cabinet of Haiti's Prime Minister Jean-Michel Lapin has been unveiled, but with only 3 women making up the 18-member cabinet. The women will oversee the ministries of Haitians living abroad, women's rights, and public health. The official decree of ministerial appointees signed by Lapin and President Jovenel Moïse also lists 4 new ministers. Other ministers of the former government have been renewed. Lapin will also take on the role of Culture and Communications Minister. The largest ice field in the southern hemisphere besides Antarctica has split into 2 as a result of the climate change, according to scientists. The ice field is more than 12,000 square kilometers in size and is located between Chile and Argentina. Members of the Latin American Observatory of Environmental Conflicts said that the break is a result of poor political decisions in relation to climate change. Scientists added that a law to protect ice fields as well as lakes and glaciers is needed. Workers of Argentina's public television station are condemning what they say is censorship and political persecution by the government of Mauricio Macri and by the president of the Argentinian Journalism Forum. We have the details in this report.
Se convierta en un vocero del gobierno.
In a statement distributed on social media, public television workers reject the censorship they have suffered since President Mauricio Macri took office.
Yesterday, we suffered an attack on our freedom of speech. 3 co-workers were sanctioned, and a legal process was started against them for referring to the political situation in Venezuela as a Cuba 10, which is nothing less than the truth, and for calling Juan Guaidó a self-proclaimed president. On top of this, on Saturday, we were the only outlet in the country that did not cover the news of Alberto Fernández running for president.
Agustín Lecky, a delegate of the Buenos Aires Press Union, also condemned the double standard in the work of the Secretary of Public Media, Hernán Lombardi.
They allow journalists who came in with this government to talk about the supposed tyranny that exists in Venezuela, about the dictator Maduro, but at the same time, they want to sanction those who condemn a clear coup d'etat and call Guaidó a self-proclaimed president who was not elected by the Venezuelan people. We do not deal in subjective opinions. We want to inform, and why we denounce that the public television is disappearing from the media map. They are giving away everything to private media. This is the role that this government came to fulfill.
Through a communique, the union warns about other irregularities in the administration of the Cambiemos party, which violate labor laws.
Months before presidential elections, the management of the TVP newscast under Néstor Slaucero decided to incorporate political supervisors to the different emissions of the newscast to carry out tasks similar to those carried out by bosses, but without the required public competition as established by law. They have lower wage, empty out relevant content from our weekly newscast, cancel weekend shows, on top of other violations of the labor laws.
Journalists are being widely persecuted. Ever since the civilian military dictatorship, we haven't seen any sanctions or layoffs due to reasons that threaten freedom of speech.
For press workers, the situation was further aggravated when a news manager fired long-tenured journalists who had been running news programs for many years, showing that no employee is safe.
A differently abled Mexican fashion designer is overcoming all obstacles as she creates her designs with her feet. 41-year-old Adriana Macias was born without arms, and she decided to become a fashion designer after getting a law degree but not being able to find a job. She just launched a new clothing line during Fashion Week in Mexico, where she hired differently abled models. She also wrote 3 books and gives conferences to help others in situations similar to hers.
When I began to understand that I was a person with a disability and that I was going to be an armless woman for life, I got help from many people, among them, of course, my parents, my sister, my best friends, and my teachers. And I felt supported. I felt so loved that I thought, I hope I'll be able to help someone as well, just like they are helping me now.
Inmates of a maximum security prison in Brazil are displaying their crochet creations in a fashion show inside the facility. Models who took part in Sao Paulo's Fashion Week modeled the creations of the around 120 inmates. The project is part of a rehabilitation plan that aims at increasing inmates' self-esteem and to give them useful skills to use once they leave prison.
I was proud of myself, seeing my creation in the show. A piece like that in front of the public, and even more proud to know that the audience liked what I made.
They defined the themes. This time they wanted to speak about opportunity, because one of the biggest problems they have when this phase ends here in prison is the lack of opportunity. That is the biggest challenge they face when they leave here.
Handmade embroidery in Bolivia is one of the country's most important cultural traditions. These costumes tell the story of slavery during the Spanish conquest.
Patience, along with mastering the use of a needle and a thimble, are key when it comes to creating these costumes by hand.
We want to remember how our grandparents used to dress when they danced La Morenada. These costumes date back to the 1950s and 1960s. With our work, we are protecting this heritage.
The dance known as La Morenada is one of the most traditional, popular dances in Bolivia.
These are 2 different kinds of costumes, el moreno turrilito y el moreno campana, all of them embroidered by hand on the assembly frame. If you look closely, is this costume branched and other shapes are embroidered.
La Morenada represents the story of slaves that were brought from Africa to work on the silver mines in Potosí. These slaves, while in chains, had to climb 4,000 meters above sea level. The customs are helping tell this story.
I want to show how heavy the customs were before. Their weight could reach 50 kilos, and others between 30 and 50 kilos.
Before, the sparkle of the customs came from the use of real stones. Sewing thread was silver, but now those materials have been replaced by custom jewelry. But the tradition is fading.
Younger generations don't want to work in this. I tell them, let me teach you, but they want to be paid to learn. They should pay me for teaching them this art.
Nonetheless, Jorge has an idea to preserve this tradition.
Besides embroidering, I am also decorating houses with these patterns and shapes. That's the plan I have.
The Morenada and its costumes have been recognized by UNESCO as a masterpiece and an oral and intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Each group of dancers is composed of 600 people.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. The European Union is heading to the polls to choose a total of 751 parliament delegates. More than 400 million people are eligible to vote in one of the biggest electoral exercises in the world. There will be 4 days of voting across the 28-nation bloc, with the UK and the Netherlands voting first. Ireland goes to the polls the following day. The remaining 25 EU nations will cast their ballots over the weekend. The UK is voting as the country wrestles with its plan to leave the bloc altogether.
I also feel it's important to send a message that we should be in Europe, and whoever we do send to Europe for whatever length of time until Brexit does or doesn't happen should be people that care about the European Union and care about the UK's place in Europe.
Because there's still a lot of power in what's being decided in the in Brussels around Brexit as well. So getting more MPs there who are against Brexit has to have some kind of an effect, I think.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has won the general election, securing another 5-year term. According to the Election Commission, Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP, is on course to take 300 out of the 543 seats in Parliament. Over 600 million people voted in the marathon election, which took 6 weeks to complete.
Today, we witness citizens from every nook and corner of the country filling these beggars' hands. I bow to my head before Indians' 1.3 billion citizens.
The Libyan Prime Minister of the Government of National Accord has met with tribe leaders during his visit to Tunisia. Fayez al-Sarraj addressed the country's delicate political situation and the need for unity, among other issues. Al-Sarraj also spoke to a group of ambassadors to Libya who are stationed in the Tunisian capital for security reasons.
This assault, which has caused us hundreds of deaths from each side, it has no place to be. We were on the brink of resolving the crisis that our country has been experiencing for years through peaceful ways. But this assault has radically destroyed the political process.
Doctors in Sudan are threatening to go on strike if protests demanding a civilian government are not met. The doctors gathered in front of a hospital to show their solidarity with protesters. Talks on who should lead a governing body between civilians and the military were suspended last Monday after a disagreement. Protests have been ongoing since April after former President Omar al-Bashir was ousted from power.
Hospitals in Sudan suffer from a lack of facilities and medicine. Some patients cannot be treated because they can afford it, and they die as the cost of the treatment in hospitals is very high. Some medicines are not even available here. In Sudan, cases of cancer are widespread.
Police in Nigeria have arrested dozens of kidnappers over the past 2 weeks in operations in the states of Kaduna, Niger, and Katsina. According to authorities, hundreds of rounds of ammunition were seized from the suspects. The arrest and seizures are part of Operation Puff Adair, which was launched to curb a wave of kidnappings in Nigeria. On March 14th, Mozambique was devastated by Cyclone Idai, which left more than 600 dead and 1,000 displaced. To provide aid after the tragedy, Cuba sent a group of doctors. Our correspondent, Andre Vieira, traveled with the doctors to see firsthand their humanitarian work.
Beira, capital of the province of Sofala, was the area hardest hit by Cyclone Idai. Throughout the central region of Mozambique, over 600 people lost their lives. 90% of the country was affected by winds of more than 200 kilometers an hour. In response, Cuba sent a brigade of 40 health workers to provide assistance.
I'm not well and came here to see a doctor. My whole body hurts, my head and my back.
Over 20,000 people have been treated by the doctors of the Henry Reeve Brigade since they arrived here. Antonia Manuel lost her home in the cyclone. Ill and with her defenses low, she's one of nearly 300 people who have undergone surgery here.
I am feeling well. I was not eating. I could only take water and soup. But now, I no longer have those problems. The day I was operated, I asked my sister to bring me something to eat, and I feel very well now.
Beyond helping victims of the cyclone, the Cuban doctors are improving the lives of people who have been suffering ailments before the disaster hit.
I have been waiting for 2 years to have surgery in the central hospital. That's why I came here, to get the surgery I need.
And so Antonio Francisco is off to have his operation, something made possible only thanks to the efforts of the Cuban people who have financed all the work of the Henry Reeve Brigade.
To the best of our abilities, we have cured many patients who did not have access to medical care, and much less to surgery.
There is a phrase our commander-in-chief says that us Cubans will never forget, and it's that by providing aid internationally, we are paying back our debt with humanity.
Since it was set up in 2005, the Henry Reeve Medical Brigade has sent over 8,000 Cuban doctors around the world. Here in Mozambique, the land of Zamora Machel, the workers from revolutionary Cuba are on their 28th mission. These are people who are ready to leave everything to help others around the world.
Desde la ciudad de Beira, capital de la provincia de Sofala, André Vieira y Sebastián Soto, Telesur, Mozambique.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.